and that on. We just wait for the boss to tell us we're good to go. So. Looks like we have the thumbs up. Good evening. Welcome to the Kaysville City Planning Commission for Thursday, December 13th, 2018. Welcome. Agenda item number 1. We need to approve the minutes from the meeting of November 8th, 2018.
I'll move that we approve the minutes from the meeting of November 8th, 2018.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Aye.
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 All right, item number 2, conditional use permit for major home occupation B, mental health group sessions at 581 South, 350 East for Dina Hargrave. Lyle?
Okay, yeah, I'll get that introduced for us, Mr. Vice Chair. And the item before you is a home business. You can see in your packet here on the map, just near Davis High School on the other side of Main Street, on the end of this cul-de-sac. The applicant's requesting to essentially host sessions from her home. For currently, she is looking for a commercial location, but until she gets that in place, is hoping to use her home starting off one night a week, typically a Thursday night, 4 to 6. And then as that grows, might add an extra night during the week until she gets into her more permanent home that she's looking for. Because of the nature of it as a group lesson, our ordinance does require that there be a limit placed on either the number of students and or the number of vehicles transporting students to prevent congestion in the area. So speaking with her as staff, we learned that there's easily 4 spaces on the property, and then she feels that at least within the cul-de-sac and street you can fit 3 cars pretty easily. So we felt 12 people, if some people are coming together and things, we would just, it's easier for us and often the businesses to restrict people rather than automobiles. So with that, staff's recommending approval with the condition that students be limited to no more than 12 at any one time. And I'd be happy to turn it back to the Planning Commission for any questions. And I wouldn't recognize the applicant because I've only chatted over the phone, so she may be here. But
is the applicant here this evening? Dina?
Ms. Hargrave?
Why don't you come on up, introduce yourself, and maybe tell us a little bit about what you're planning on doing.
My name is Dina Hargrave, and I am doing, my partner and I have a business called Authenticity Utah, and we are working with families and adolescents needing mental health, especially group mental health work. And at the time being, we do not have a facility, so we were planning on using my basement of my house temporarily until we find a suitable place.
All right, thank you. Discussion?
Just wonder if you had any feedback from any of your neighbors?
Of not so far, no.
Okay.
No one has asked me anything.
And then you mentioned that you want to have this just kind of as a temporary, maybe over the next year or so, or is that still a plan, or if this works, are you planning on just maybe keeping it here?
No, we hope to expand, and so it wouldn't, that place would not be suitable. So for now, we are only thinking of holding maybe 2 groups total, and not at the same time. So one group of 12, and then another group of 12 on a different day. So it would never be more than that, and that probably won't last more than 6 months, actually.
So if we were to, say, put a condition for a period of a year,
yeah,
you'd be fine with that?
Absolutely.
Then if for some reason things haven't changed that much, come back and ask for another one?
That would be perfectly suitable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There was a hand. Do you want to come on up, introduce yourself, and...
Thank you for taking a minute. My name's Craig Carlisle. I live a couple houses up from Ms. Hargrave. I'm representing about 8 or 9 different neighbors who are very concerned about what is going to happen in this situation. Does she have insurance for this? Do the drivers coming up, mental health people don't always have the best financial situation? It's a small cul-de-sac, and we're getting more and more teenagers in the cul-de-sac that are bringing cars in, and there's sometimes not room to park especially in the summer and with the winter the way it is too. We are concerned about the amount of traffic, car and foot. There's a number of small children in the neighborhood as well that play in the circle, ride bikes. And there's an empty house that is for sale that is a family home, 5 bedrooms, so obviously more children will be moving in.
Did you or any of your neighbors express any of these concerns to her previously?
I only found out about it about 2 days ago that this was happening.
Okay, so no. Thank you.
We don't know exactly what kind of people we're going to be dealing with coming in. Are we dealing with people who live in halfway houses, criminal records, the state of the people coming into our neighborhood? This is a family neighborhood. We don't have a lot of problems. We want to keep it that way. Again, children playing. This is an area where the reason we live in a cul-de-sac is so there's not a lot of cars in and out and et cetera. Friends are coming over. There's, a fair amount of traffic. It's going to get worse, and I think this is going to make it really worse. I've talked to John and Tina Sheffield, Zach and Kristen Archuleta, Mark and Diet Jensen, Joe and Irene Wells, Stephanie Meads, which is here, Craig and Roberta Carlisle, and Val and Lorraine Starkey, which are all neighbors, and we're all concerned about, again, who we're dealing with, the parking issues, and there's also neighbors behind that have adjoining property that don't know about this. Like I say, I found out from one of my neighbors a couple days ago. So I think there's some questions unanswered as to what kind of people are we going to have coming in. Are they going to be staying overnight? As she got 7 bedrooms in this house and very few children and family living there, is people going to be staying overnight? There's too many unanswered questions for us right now. We think that she needs to look at her liability. She needs to have some form of insurance. And I think Kaysville needs to look at its liability as well, because if this is a precedent set, it could be, it's great to say it's going to be done in a year, but what if it's not? And it's just something that nobody wants in our neighborhood right now. Not that we don't want to help people, but if this is a for-profit business, then she needs to find somewhere where she can rent and do it properly.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would the applicant be interested in coming in and perhaps addressing some of his issues? Sure. Thank you.
The groups are limited to 12 people for a 1-hour period of time, so no one will be spending the night. That is not the intention at all. As far as the people who will be attending these groups, no one's coming from any halfway houses. No, this is not drug abuse counseling. This is mental health only, and it's families and their adolescent children. I'm trying to think what are the other pieces that were concerning. The traffic, I can completely understand. I'm hoping that for a 1-hour period of time, the church would not be averse to letting some of our people park there for 1 hour. And then maybe that would alleviate some of the traffic concern at least, because the church is directly across the street from my cul-de-sac in that area, that A-frame church right there. Let me think. This is also a cash only. There's no insurance accepted, so when you think about the types of populations that can afford to pay cash to do these services, it's not halfway house applicants.
I think the concern may have been more, do you have liability insurance?
Oh, and I do. I have liability insurance for my company. I have a liability insurance for myself, and I have also covered our homeowners insurance liability to cover the same.
Okay.
Yes.
Just a question. So, as you're saying, the young people that are the subject of this, they're not coming on their own. They're coming with family members usually?
Yes. Yes. Because there's 2 components to this. While they will be receiving their group portion of that, and I will be so my partner will be conducting the group with the adolescents, and I'm conducting a group with the parents to help them. And then we, at the end of the session, take a few minutes to combine those 2 groups and have a tiny bit of that part left over at the end for both parties to talk. So, yeah, it's absolutely for families. Yeah.
So the total number of 12 people, that would include?
Yes, because we
The
imagine
person,
that
the
6
whole-
adolescents and 6 single family members would come. Possibly we'd have double family members. I've done groups in the past. I've been doing this work for over 6 years, and we've generally only have one parent show up to these types of events, and so that's what I anticipate. However, it could be as large as 15 if we get another family member who decided to come along. But
Where did you do this before?
I currently work at the Neurobehavioral Center for Growth in Layton, and I've also worked at Highland Springs Specialty Clinic. I've worked at the Davis School District Schools. I'm a school psychologist as well as a licensed clinical mental health counselor.
So this, you've been employed with other folks, and this is your first venture off to do your own business then?
I have had my own business before. I was a consultant doing curriculum and testing for homeschooled families. And I did that for 12 years prior to getting my license in school psychology.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question for staff, for Lyle. So I'm trying to pull up the ordinance, but our internet's slow again. What's the specific use that it's listed for under the conditional use category?
I believe they're simply group lessons is what it's considered.
Okay.
Let me pull up the specific text, and I'll respond to that as soon as I find it here in just a moment. So as a major home occupation B from Title 1726.4 under 12, it lists organized classes as a permitted use through the conditional use process. There are a number of other uses listed there also, dressmaking, woodworking, contractors, etc. I think it best fits as an organized group class. And then as part of that provision, that's where we get the limits shall be placed on the number of students and or vehicles that come with it.
So one of the issues that I see is that this is allowed by our ordinance, and as such, really, as you know, if you've gone through any of the planning commission trainings, that on a conditional use, the only way we can turn it down is if we cannot substantially mitigate. And mitigate doesn't mean eliminate, it just means lessen any impact that we may see. And I think, you know, with the suggested condition by staff, that probably addresses that issue.
Okay.
I think another thing on conditional use, if there's concerns, I mean, if it is granted and there's concerns, conditional means it can be revoked if there's ever any concerns. And that would have to come from some of the neighbors. You having a hard time hearing? Okay. So that's one of the caveats, if you will, with the conditional use permit is they can be revoked. I guess I'd ask Mr. Carlisle if that helped answer or satisfy any of your questions. I was just wondering if that helped answer any of your concerns or questions that you expressed.
Well, can I speak here, or do I need to
Come up.
Please approach the mic.
Thank you.
For the record.
One thing that would have helped is if she would have gone around the neighborhood and told us, hey, this is what I want to do, here's the situation, etc. We came into this totally blind. We are very concerned about the parking. We're very concerned about cars coming in and out. We're very concerned about who is going to be there. It sounds like it's family, etc. We're concerned about possible violence. You know, I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but you never know nowadays with kids and if they're on drugs and mental health, whatever. I think if you guys decide to let this go, that she needs to have her people park in the church parking lot. I don't think there is enough. There is not enough room to bring in 6 to 8 more cars into that cul-de-sac as it is. There's a fire hydrant in there. Some of the houses you can't hardly even park in front of legally. People, The neighbor across the street has a large family, 120 grandkids, and they're always over there, and sometimes parking gets a little hard to get, and that was one of our concerns. And again, the children playing in the cul-de-sac. My neighbor has 4 children between the ages of 2 and 8, and they're hell on wheels, excuse the French. They're out riding bikes, and they've all learned, and they're playing basketball and chasing the ball into the street, and they're loving life. But if there's cars coming in and out, we're very concerned about that.
And I think that's one of the things that Gary was leaning towards. This is conditional use. If you do run into those problems, the evening she holds classes, there's no parking for hours on end, and their kids are, near death. You can always come back to the city and say, look, she's having these problems. We can revoke a conditional use permit. We can't anticipate all problems. You live across the street from Davis High. You're going to have kids, and you're going to have a lot with mental health problems. They're going to be in your area. We have no control over that. We do have control over her. If those classes get out of control, we can, come back from staff and we can revoke that. But there will be some vigilance on your part to let us know. We're not going to be going by there every Thursday evening for an hour to sit there and watch it, but you'll be there.
Come on, guys. Why not?
Perhaps as a suggestion for the Planning Commission's consideration, we've done this on a number of conditional use permits for home occupations similar where parking is a concern. I'd be hesitant to say they have to park at the church, but we have done language such as they cannot park in the cul-de-sac, which probably would put them either in the church, assuming she gets that permission, or on 550 South, or in her driveway. So you could maybe tweak with that idea a little bit. It sounds like the applicant, and I'll let her readdress that, may be willing to do such a thing.
To mention 550 South, the way it's laid out, I can't park in front of my own home. My home faces 550 South. And the way the parking's set up and the way the lanes are set, it's extremely dangerous to park a car on 550 South on either side of the street. Maybe a little bit further down the block, the road widens, but we've got 4 different lanes of traffic entering and exiting basically in front of my house. So to park in front of my house, it's not going to work.
Well, and that picture actually shows 4 vehicles parked on 550 South, about a half a block from her house. Got to zoom in.
That's as close as it'll let me go on this one.
There's none on further down.
This
yes,
stretch?
It opens up.
Yeah, right there.
That if they want to park in that area, it's fine. But
That's as close as the church parking lot.
yeah, where my house is the first one going in the cul-de-sac, and I don't park in front of my own house. And if people want to come in, I say, hey, you might want to park around the side or pull into my driveway. I don't think it's safe to park on that street where I live.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, any other discussion?
I just have a question for Lyle. So the condition, we don't have a separate category then for health-related businesses or mental health-related businesses? Oh, sorry.
We have a separate category under, they're listed alphabetically A through Q of different use types that are allowed as a major home occupation. And, it says major home occupations may include, but are not necessarily limited to, so it recognizes we can't think of every single type of possible business and list it. It does specifically restrict like a dental clinic, a welding shop, a funeral home, major auto repair, so there are some things that are outright not permitted within that. Okay. So if the Planning Commission finds that it doesn't really fit as an organized class, my opinion, I think it's very similar to many that we've done under that definition. And so at least personally, I think that's where it best fits within what's stated within the ordinances.
Okay, thanks. Just wondering. And I know we had another one kind of similar where they said, bringing in a lot of traffic would be a pain in the cul-de-sac, but it's hard to police which cars belong to clients versus which cars belong to family members or neighbor, you know?
Or the 120 grandkids.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that makes it kind of tough.
Yeah. All right. If there's no other discussion, do we have a motion?
I'm somewhat a little mixed with this, but I will make a motion with some conditions to it. I will move that we approve a conditional use permit for major home occupation B for mental health group sessions in compliance with Title 17-26-4 of the Kaysville City Ordinance, with the following conditions: that no more than 12 people be in attendance to those meetings, and that they do not park in the cul-de-sac, and that it be for no more than 1 year.
Second. I have just a question on your motion. So saying not parking in the cul-de-sac, would that, would parking in the driveway still be permissible?
I think some of the concern, well, it's no, and the reason being is some of the concern is the traffic up and down the street into the cul-de-sac. So I'd say they'd have to park outside of the cul-de-sac, and that would be left up to the applicant to determine where they'd park. You know, if she gets permission from the church, that would be fine. Otherwise, they'd have to find somewhere to park.
We have a second. Gary?
Aye.
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 Again, I'd encourage, if it does become an issue or a concern, to come back to staff and express those concerns, with I think traffic probably being the biggest concern.
Agreed. All right, item 3. Final plat approval for the Mid Oaks Farm subdivision at approximately 1300 West Roche Lane for J.D. Horn.
Okay, as introduction, the Planning Commission will remember seeing this recently on the far west end of Roche Lane. Mr. Horn owns, among this piece, 1 acre of property that he's simply looking to split in half for the purpose of 2 building lots. The preliminary plat that was before you looked almost identical to this. We've reviewed a few other extra items, and as staff, we're ready to recommend approval of the final plat to the Planning Commission. And again, on this, you are the decision body, so we're looking for a decision from you regarding that. It meets the acreage and frontage requirements. There's already street improvements all the way up to curb. It does require the sidewalk and then the utilities for the home construction.
Thank you. Any questions, discussion?
Wonder if the applicant's here.
Is the applicant here tonight, Lyle?
I don't believe Mr. Horn is here this evening.
Okay.
I don't see him.
Okay. And Lyle, you indicated that all of the requirements are met for the plat.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. The zoning, it's an RA half-acre lot zoning. The lots meet that. The frontage meets that. Everything is standard and pretty straightforward on this.
All right, can I have a motion?
I'd make a motion that we grant final plat approval for the Mid Oak Farm subdivision at approximately 1300 West Roche Lane, as indicated in the staff report.
Second.
Aye.
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 I shouldn't speak up.
Thank you. Item 4, a public hearing for the preliminary and final plat approval for the Richter Farm subdivision, Second Amendment at 1572 South Sunset Drive for Cheryl Richter.
Okay, this is another lot being split into 2. We are looking to do the preliminary and final plat together on this one. The last one, we probably would have done the same, but we had to tweak a few items on the plat before we wanted to bring it back for final. This one does have enough detail and is in line with everything that we felt comfortable doing both together. Essentially, the applicant, the Richter family, has almost 3 acres of property on the west side of Sunset Drive, as you can see here on the screen. And from the aerial, you can see the fence line and where the dark grass stops and the property below it goes is where they hope to split the lot. That will leave a lot of 1 acre in size and a new lot that would be almost 2 acres, 1.8 acres in size. Both lots well exceed the frontage and lot size requirements for the RA zone where they're located. And this one is also Sunset Drive. Full street improvements are already in place on this. So as staff, we feel ready to recommend approval of both the preliminary and final plat. But as stated by Mr. Vice Chair, it is a public hearing, so we'll look for those this evening and then look for your recommendation to the City Council regarding the preliminary plat. And then our recommendation would be the final plat decision be subject to their approval of the condition of the preliminary plat at the City Council level.
All right, thank you. Is the applicant here this evening? Do you want to come on up and introduce yourself?
I am Cheryl Richter, on the property there. I just want to separate the 2 acres from my own, and I have a potential buyer who, as I hear of it right now, wants just to do an estate property on it. So that's pretty much the way it is.
Okay, thank you. Why don't you go ahead and have a seat, and we'll,
Okay.
why don't we go ahead and open up the public hearing for this particular item? Is there anyone that wants to speak on this item? All right, then we'll close the public hearing. Something tells me the next one's not going to go quite that quickly. And any discussion on this one?
Seems pretty,
Yes.
pretty simple.
No, Lyle, once again, it meets all the requirements.
Correct.
All right, do we have a recommendation then? And Lyle, you may have to guide us here a little bit.
So yeah,
Make a
we'll look for 2
recommendation.
motions if we could. One for the preliminary plat, and you were just a recommending body on the preliminary plat process. So if we'll start with that, then if you'd like, I'll help you word your final plat.
Okay, I'll make a recommendation. I'll make a motion that we recommend the preliminary plat approval for Richter Farm Subdivision 2 for Von Hill and Sherry Richter at 1572 South Sunset Drive.
I'll second that.
Aye.
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 Aye. And the second half of that, anyone, Tamara, you want to take a stab again?
Okay, I'll make a motion that upon City Council's approval of the preliminary plat, I make a recommendation that we grant final approval
Yes.
for the Richter Farm subdivision for Von Hill and Cheryl Richter at 1572 South Sunset Drive.
I'll second.
So this would be, this would only apply once, if the City Council approves the
Approves it.
preliminary plat.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
And Tamara, it's
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, item 5. Public hearing and request to rezone 4.1 acres of property at 1480 West Willow Drive and 1576 West 200 North from R120 Single Family Residential and RA Residential Agriculture to the R2 Single and Two Family Residential Zoning District for Robert Green and James Nooner.
Okay, I'll give an introduction to this, and I believe Commissioner Wood stated he'll reaffirm the process for those who are hoping to speak on this after I have my turn, so I'll try and set the stage here a little bit. The property just west of the Smith's Marketplace off of the rail trail consists of just over 4 acres, 4.1. That includes property from the Green family on the south side that fronts 200 North, and portions of the property of the Nooner family on the northern half of the lot. The current zoning essentially is, there are 2 different zones. They're very similar. You have the R120, which is 20,000 square foot lot type development, and the RA, which is half-acre square foot lot development. The difference between a 20,000 and a half acre is 1,780 square feet, so they're very similar in size. They're very similar in scope as a single-family type zoning designation. The request from the applicant that's before you is to rezone all the property indicated to the R2 zoning district. Of note, on the R2, and I'll speak to this a little bit, it is a 1 and 2 family type dwellings, so it allows a variation in housing types. The applicant has provided a concept plan showing what they would ultimately like to do on the property. This particular plan would be necessary to do also with a PRUD overlay based on the housing types, clustering, open space, private streets. So it would be an open space subdivision. So should the commission be inclined to head this direction, there would be additional steps necessary with the zoning and subdivision to get this in place. This type of development without the overlay wouldn't work. So it could look very different. But ultimately, over the 4.1 acres, and knowing this is kind of the direction they're interested in, it's worth noting roughly under the PRUD type development, the R2 zone would allow 1 unit per every 4,000 square feet of property. So over the 4.1 acres, what that would actually equate to, it's just over 10 units an acre, could yield as many as about 44 units. I believe the plan they've shown here, I'll probably get it wrong, I think it's 39. I'll let the applicant maybe correct that. 37, sorry, thank you. So again, that is one way that it could turn out should this be the direction to go. Again, as a zoning action, it's a legislative decision, and so what you're looking at before you is how well this proposal works at the specific location, how well it works within the language of the general plan. Kind of the short and sweet of that, we hear this over and over again as we're looking in all the developments we do west of the freeway. Residential development would generally be 2 units per acre with some additional density along major streets. 200 North does qualify as such. It's always a debate on what additional density means, but that's what it states. Some known factors of consideration on this, there have been some emails, I know they've been forwarded to the Planning Commission, some couldn't make it this evening, so those have been forwarded. I'll just not reread every one of those comments, but recognize that some comments have already been passed along to you for your consideration. Of note, in some of those comments are concerns on infrastructure, and I will make just mention of one that staff is aware of, in particular with the sewer. And so it's not a hard and fast. We're looking at the rezone. We haven't done the subdivision and technical reviews to determine exactly how all the utilities will work out. But we do have some indication from the sewer district that they may not have the capacity to service the number of units proposed. But I would recommend that if the commission's inclined to head this direction, and ultimately the city council, we could give a direction or indication to the applicant to confirm that, and either ahead of the rezone being granted or through the subdivision process, we would be required to do that anyway, even if they have the zoning. If the infrastructure is not in place, then it can't happen. So other than that, staff doesn't make a strong recommendation on these, again, because of the legislative type nature. Your homework tonight is to give a recommendation to the city council, and ultimately they'll have the final say as to whether or not the zone is implemented or not as requested. The other indication I would do, however, from staff, should the Planning Commission be inclined to move this direction, I think based on the type of development and the impacts it may have, where it's a little bit different than some of the surroundings, would be to do it through a development agreement to ensure that, if you do like whatever direction is decided upon, and that we can ensure that that's the type of development that's implemented. With that, I'll return it to the Planning Commission and just remind you it is a public hearing, as you know, and be here to happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Lyle. Any preliminary questions?
I've got a couple. So Lyle, in order to do the density that they're indicating on their desired plan, they would need the PRUD overlay.
Correct. A straight R2 zone, because you would have public streets. The unit types are limited to 1 and 2 family type dwellings, which twin homes and or single family. The lot size is 4,000 square feet. So just the orientation, having the frontage requirements, I believe it's a 35-foot frontage, if I may be incorrect in that. So, but how you lay it out, it gets restrictive. So once you do a PRUD, that gives you more flexibility in how you position things. Private streets can be smaller than public streets. And so that would ultimately be what would take to arrive at the type of project that they've.
But they're not asking for the PRUD tonight.
Not at the time. Part of that's a staff issue. As we started with them, we talked about the R2 to accommodate what they were doing, but we did not include the PRUD at the time, and not understanding the full scale or what it would take to get it. So as we've seen things come through,
So it would need another rezone.
we recognize that would have to be a step to go that direction.
So if it were rezoned to R2, it'd probably be about half the density or maybe even less. than what they're
Potentially, yeah.
proposing.
So we've not seen the layout and exactly how that
Yeah.
works, but
Yeah.
clearly it wouldn't fit the same number of homes.
So I've got a question about is it the sewer capacity that's the potential issue?
Yeah, and so we've bumped into this on other projects. Honestly, I don't have an exact answer from the sewer district on what is available or not, but they've indicated over the years that the city has, in their general plan, been pretty hard on the 2-unit per acre type development.
Uh-huh.
Essentially put their infrastructure in to accommodate that type.
Oh, I see.
And it has always said, or at least to my understanding over the past 20 years or so, with additional density in certain areas. So I don't know if there's excess capacity somewhere or not, but it is possible, based on its proximity, that this development could feed into a Flint Street line. Theoretically, again, I don't know the slopes or the distances where I
Yeah.
believe there is capacity. Otherwise, it may have to go down to Angel Street, which is what the sewer district has told us recently on other projects. Is essentially with slated for 2-unit type development only. So if they put their units in, somebody else may not be able to do their units until they upsize
So
what
the
they have.
capacity then runs from Flint to Angel, and then there's another from Angel west. Is there another system?
I wish I were a little bit more familiar, but I believe 200 North has a line that runs into Angel and then south to Central Davis. I believe Flint is another trunk line that runs south into
So then
Central
that
Davis.
would feed the development and growth west of Angel as well, as far as you're aware?
So west of Angel Street, much of that development pumps up into Angel Street. So most everything else is able to gravity feed into their trunk lines.
Okay.
But west of Angel Street, they use lift stations to actually mechanically pump sewage up to Angel Street and then down to the sewer district. So
Well, yeah, that was my question. Because I was thinking there's a fair amount of land still left to be developed along here, and saying this now would tax the capacity. But I see what you're saying. You're saying that their planning and their sizing has been for the 2 units per acre density.
It's
overall.
not at capacity, and we're not headed for disaster, but it just means somebody else, when they come to develop, if it's used up on certain developments, may not have it. So I mention that because I don't know that it's impossible to overcome that, and that's kind of the purpose of the subdivision process, is to work through the engineering and technical nature of the
Yeah.
development. I believe what the applicant's looking for tonight is this a direction that's of interest? And if so, then they could pursue finding those answers before, getting their approvals with the subdivision process and such. So the political versus the technical hurdles.
You say there may be a possibility of going up to Flint Street, but that would probably, I'm betting it would require a pump station.
Yeah, I don't know. So maybe I'll let the applicant speak to different ideas, but if you don't build basements and you've got a lot of room for slope,
Yeah.
your sewer doesn't have to be too super steep to make it. It is some distance, but it could be an option.
Yeah. Maybe so. Okay.
It could be possible to pump it technically. So,
Okay.
but yeah, the sewer district has just indicated that initial, and I believe it relates to the Angel Street line, but other options haven't been fully vetted. But yeah, I just know that concern's out there.
So I have a question. Who would pay for that potentially if another pump station was added or something? The developer?
Yeah, typically, if they've created the need, that would be one of their development costs.
Okay.
I think if the city were inclined to grant rezones and increase the density, then they would have to. I think then the city would have to modify their plans for capital improvements and including the sewer
And
district.
include that?
And then you'd assess a cost to that, and then you'd start charging impact fees for new development to help pay for that cost.
Oh,
But
okay.
that supposes a lot of things first happening.
Oh, okay, I see. I have one other question. How much notice generally does the public get for things like this?
Yeah, so by ordinance, we send out a mailer 10 days prior to a public hearing
Okay.
at a minimum, and then we put up we send it at 10 days. I don't know when it arrives to the. That's when it goes to the post office, and then we put up a sign typically about a week before the public hearing on the property where it's indicated. So we mail notice to property owners within 500 feet of the proposed area.
That's per state statute, correct?
That's per our ordinances. So
Local ordinance.
statute either requires that we put it in the newspaper and put up a sign, or mail notice within a distance stated by ordinance. Until about a year ago, we had been putting it in the paper, but through this Planning Commission and City Council decided that we'd go the mailing route. And so we no longer put it in the clipper, but we directly mail nearby property owners within the 500 feet that this city has chosen.
State statute just specifies posting and publishing. It doesn't say anything about mailing or posting on the property or anything like that. It's just with regard to posting it in public places and on your internet website and things like that. That's all the state. But local, if the and Kaysville does have a local ordinance requirement, and that needs to be complied with.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'd like to invite the applicant to come up and give us a chance to have them present to us what their ideas are, ask some questions, at which time we'll then open up the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. My name is Hugh Park. I am a lifetime resident of Layton City, and actually served on the Planning Commission there for several years, planning chair, and know the position you're in. Developed for the last 10 years, done projects from large custom homes to commercial to townhomes. And so when this property became available, we took a look at it, and it has a few challenges for single family type construction. And so as we were looking at it, we thought that it would make a good project to buffer in between the new Smith's commercial area that is there and that area, along with the trail into the existing, lower density subdivision. Therefore, as we started looking at this, there has been quite the market lately, obviously, with the turn of how the younger generation has been purchasing homes. A lot of these young kids do not like yard work. They like having their freedom. They like having things taken care of for them. And, a lot of these young kids make good money and therefore can afford something like this. Our idea here is not to, we want to increase the density, but the townhomes are going to sell in the $300,000 range. So these are not going to be a standard, just an entry-level type product. As we have gone forward, and I've pulled comps, yesterday I pulled comps from Kaysville City to find out, the general, how many sales are available right now, how many properties are listed between 300 and 350,000, and there are 5 properties in Kaysville right now that are listed for around the $300,000 mark, and nothing below 300,000. So, well, there might be. I take that back. There were one or two around 259 to 260. Other than that, everything is north of that mark, and so we find that there will be a need in this $300,000 range for a townhome. So we believe it will be a good project. We have brought on a architectural firm out of Ogden, bought Pantone Architecture, who have done some renderings for us. And I don't know if Lyle, I don't know if you can connect into my iPad, and I've got a few pictures of those. But these are just, and again, this is just a conceptual idea as to what we've put together. We've spent an hour, well, more than an hour, but we've spent some time putting this together, looking at designs and things of that nature. There still has to be many things discussed. We've got to line streets up right. We have to meet all city ordinances. We have spoken with the sewer district, and pretty much what Lyle covered with you is what they have told us, that they are still running studies and capacity studies right now. to give the final capacity is to make sure that all of West Kaysville can build out. So, in just looking at this, we have also acquired an acre from Mr. Nooner up there, and to kind of buffer that subdivision into, between the Smiths and everything else going on there. We have found that in projects we've done in the past, these are well maintained. They have a professional landscaping company come in, streets are pushed, landscapes are maintained and taken care of, and with the HOA dues, which will be due by everybody, we'll maintain a nice quality project here. So with that, that's our idea and our concept of what we'd like to do on this piece.
All right, thank you very much.
I have a question for him.
Should the commission be interested in seeing those items, let me know, and he could email them to me or something. Right now, we don't have a way to connect to his device.
Tamara, I think we'll invite him back up afterwards for questions from us after the public hearing.
Do you have
Thank
any questions for me while I'm here? Or?
Why don't you go ahead and have a seat? We're going to open it up to a public hearing,
Okay.
and then we may come or call you back up to answer some questions
All right,
specifically.
thank you.
All right, at this time, we'd like to open the public hearing. To anyone that has any comments on this, we would like to remind you that we limit those comments to 3 minutes or less. And this is your opportunity. Once we close the public hearing, then you're audience members again. And we appreciate you not shouting out, what about the children? Or, now's your time to say that. So if you would like to make some comments, please come on up to the podium, state your name, and name, address would be helpful as well. Thank you.
Gary Mumford, 1504 Willow Drive. I'm in favor of residential zoning for this area. I'm not in favor of commercial or light industrial. I'm hoping the developer can make something work. I'd like to just point out a few things on this preliminary site plan. So that, because I have concerns about traffic and safety and privacy. The entrance should line up with, in my opinion, the entrance into Mountain Vista Estates there, so that better traffic and safety with the traffic. The dead-end streets, I think, is a problem. It's a new world today with on-site buying and delivery trucks. On my street, we have at least 3 delivery trucks a day, and they're going to get into those dead-end areas and have to back up. There's not a lot of backyards for the children to play, and they're just going to be out and about and having these trucks backing up. Snow plows, the residents are going to have to hire the snow plows, but they're going to be backing up too, because there's no way to do it. I don't even know where they're going to put the snow on that one group where the townhouses face each other, because with townhouses it's mostly all driveways, and the dumpsters should be shown so that the current neighbors know where the dumpsters are and know that the dumpsters aren't right next to their property. And also garbage trucks have to back up, and so if the future site plans could include those dumpsters, in townhouses there's not really a place for a individual, you can't do a side yard or anything, so you need to have a central dumpster normally. It'd be good if fences were shown. There's a great fence at Smith's Marketplace in the back. There's deliveries made there, and there's a nice stone fence that's quite high, and it works really good with the sound. And these residents that are in these townhouses are facing that parking lot. And I don't know why, but car alarms are going off all the time in that parking lot. I don't know if their keys get bumped while they're shopping, or if they come out and can't remember where they parked and they're hitting the button, but car alarms and other noise from that there's on Saturdays quite often there's tents and there's things going on, and it's right next to where these townhouses will be. So I think a fence should be shown, and the fence, a little vinyl fence is not going to block out the sound. I think they should look at something like what Smith's Marketplace already has in the back part. And then, of course, the current residents, those are, big backyards, and I think they're due the privacy of sound privacy, and so a nice fence there would be good. And if that were proposed, I think that would help. The line of trees there that's close to the trail, that just past that line of trees is probably where the fence would need to go, because then that's UTA property. UTA owns the trail, and then the city maintains the trail, and so there's not really a lot of open space that the developer's offering. That is, that's UTA, and it's probably going to be on the other side of the fence. And while I'm at it, those trees are over a pipeline. There's 2 petroleum pipelines that go there, and trees are not permitted on that easement. And so they really should check with the easement or the pipeline owner and see because I think all those backyards are on the easement too, and they need to, check before they revise their site plan on that. If you've been to townhouses, like visiting somebody at a townhouse, you know the importance of visitor parking. These, with the trail being so close, the residents are going to have a couple of bicycles and a bicycle trailer and a stroller in their garage, and they have a deep freeze and everything. And so there's cars parked. When you go to the townhouses, you see cars parked all over in the driveways. And it's important to have visitor parking. And so that would be something I think the developer should include. There's no playground equipment shown. There's a pickleball court, but young children, it'd be helpful to have a playground shown. There's
we're past our 3 minutes. Can you summarize?
One last item then.
Thank you.
The townhouses that are right next to those big current neighbors' backyards, they look like they're about 15 feet away. And so you have a 2-story townhouse looking down on the children or grandchildren playing in those backyards. I think it would be good to have either more setback. I think the roadway could be revised and have a circular roadway, and if the circle were on the outside next to the neighbors, then that would give that buffer. Or another possibility would be to have single-story condos there next to the current neighbors, and that way you're not looking down over.
All right.
So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All right, and just as a reminder for the rest of you that come up, when the buzzer goes off, summarize. Thank you.
My name's Butch Over. It's Elton Over, and I live at 1480 Willow Drive. I live right next door to the Nooners. And if you could look at this map and you can see my home, they're going to build these townhouses directly up my property line from just about where my house is up to the trail. So everything I do out in my backyard, I'm going to see these big 2-story townhouses, one stacked right up on top of the other. And I just don't think this is right, gentlemen, that we're going to take this kind of an action. If you want to do something along that property line between myself and Jim, you need to put in, like Brother Mumford says, you need to put in something, maybe a condo, a single-level condo, that I can look out my house and I won't just see 2-story townhouses. Everything I see out of my yard is going to be these townhouses, and I don't really know why we're taking this action to put all these townhouses in here. Everything you see in this is townhouses, townhouses, townhouses. This is a subdivision. Everything we have down there in West Kaysville is subdivisions. Well, awfully lot of them are single-story homes, but a lot of them are two-story homes. But they're subdivisions. They're not townhouses that are just stacked on top of each other, and that's what we're going to end up with here. And I'm looking at this very personal, that I don't think this is right. There's nothing I can say really that's going to influence you gentlemen to what needs to be done at this. But this is not right. You need to look at this whole project again and decide a whole new approach to this, not just townhouses stacked on top of townhouses.
All right, thank you very much.
My name is Clark Steed, and I'm at 1528 Willow Drive. I'm 2 doors down from Mr. Mumford, who just spoke earlier, and 3 houses from the Overs that just spoke there. So you can see just kind of on the edge there. In 2002, when my wife and I decided to move to Kaysville, I turned down a lot in Syracuse because of their poor planning and poor city. My family has a farm there. I had a free lot. Many of my cousins have built there and done very well, but I turned it down because I wanted to live in Kaysville. And came in, we noticed the property here where the Smiths was, and went and I came to the city, and I met with the city and said, what are your plans with that? They're like, all West Kaysville residential. The Nooners, we went through this whole thing. We fought for years of this. Now, the compromise was, as we put in this, it's going to be just a little community market where we're going to keep the same look and feel for the city as we develop the rest of things. We asked about the adjacent pieces of land. We were told at the time that they will continue to be single residential property. I mean, no promises were made. We understand that. I just personally, I know for the feel, the Utah's hometown that Kaysville tries to portray, for us living in this neighborhood, because of traffic and other things, this truly would impact that. And the fact that you're potentially putting a sewer pump station near my backyard, that if that backs up all the neighborhood now, I mean, the sewage scares me to death. And the other thing is just kind of frustrating is that there's a valve station right there that the pipeline owns, and it's showing on the plat as a park. And that's not going to be park or open space. It's all fenced in right now by the gas pipeline company. The other thing to notice is all of our houses along this pipeline are set nearly 200 feet off of that pipeline easement. This gas pipeline is over 50 years old, I believe, and has not been replaced. I think there is also a safety hazard by putting houses right on top of this gas pipeline, essentially. You've got all these backyards that are sitting just within feet of that gas pipeline, a high pressurized. It's interesting in the winter because the snow won't even, it stays on, it melts where that pipeline is. So it's used a lot, and it's heated, it's pressurized. Personally, it would scare me to have my family and raise my kids on top of a high pressure gas line like that. I had one last thing, and I can't remember what it is, but my time is up. I just wanted one more thing, too. If anything, please give us more time to discuss this. We got this notice less than a week ago. Maybe it was exactly a week ago that it arrived in the mail. I don't know what it is, and I don't blame you, but it seems like every time we fight this land, It happens a week before Christmas. It happens a week before some other major holiday. Maybe it's coincidence, but to me it feels very planned that way, and it doesn't give the neighbors a chance to come and really speak what they feel about the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Paul Waldrop. I live on 245 Seymour Drive. You can't see it in this picture, but it's just down the road. And I am well acquainted with the people that live on 200 North. I don't really know the Willow people other than I've seen their faces at church as I walk through the halls. One of the issues that has not been addressed is if you look at this backyard area, and if you could, it's just kind of the clear area in the middle.
There should be a...
There is a pointer up there if you'd like to use it.
Geez, I have more power than I thought. I don't know how to turn it on.
Have to know how to use your power.
Well, I don't think the battery works. Yeah, it's not working well. May I trade you for a minute? I'll be glad to return it. If I can find... Well, I'm kind of...
Flip it around. There's a red button.
There we go. Okay, so this area here, last year, that area flooded drastically. We had, if you'll remember, like in February, we had a bunch of rain and stuff. And so these houses through, including my own basement, flooded with 3 inches of water. One of them had 8 inches of water. The house that's on the corner belongs to the Waters. They're the ones with the 8 inches of water. Just down the road, you can't see it here, there is the Saxe home, and in the back of the Saxe home, they have one of these collection ponds that they actually kayak in when the floods come. When that fills up, this all starts flooding horribly. And we haven't even began to address that or considered those effects. Now, I want you to know, if I owned this property, this would be a great project. Matter of fact, I just retire and go fishing more. This area here, supposedly there could be 7 more homes in this area, and they want to put 29 additional homes on top of that. 29 homes. Now, I was like, I had an argument with somebody online. They were saying, well, gee, are you against the poor? And I said, are you kidding me? The poor won't even be able to walk on this place. It's going to be $300,000. Why is that property worth $300,000 for a little time, those homes you saw? Well, it's because this neighborhood all around, they're on half acres. And they are nice homes. And you know, I'm just an old pig farmer from New Mexico. I'm going to tell you that right now. This is the nicest bunch of people, the best people I've ever been around in my life. And I don't want to mess that up because it's kind of nice for a pig farmer to be around good people. But I'm going to tell you that this is, as these gentlemen spoke, this is going to create a great deal of stress on all of the systems. And I mean, 200 North, the farms, the Websters just sold their property. We're building homes right and left. We're not even at a point where I think we can almost keep up with our infrastructure. Well, if you look at this property here, and this belongs to Nephi Harvey, they're great people, and this property here and over here, there's more ground over here and there. So now, are we going to start selling our ground for townhomes? And this is going to become the townhome center of West Kaysville. I really don't want that. Okay. And that's what I'm going to say is that I, like I said, I'm an old poor pig farmer from New Mexico. It's taken me 50 years. I quit school with a 9th grade education, went in the Marine Corps on my 17th birthday, and I crawled myself to this community. And I love this community. I've only been here 10 years. But I love the people. Even, I don't know these folks that well, but we're the salt of the earth. I'm not. I'm a pig farmer. But they're the salt of the earth. Helps. But what I want to say is I don't want to see the beauty of this community and the unity of this community. And I'm not against anybody. I'm for what's here now. I'm not. And if I had if I was a builder, if I was a landowner, geez, this would be great. Like I said, I could retire. But I'm just a feller that owns a home on the street, and I want that to remain what I bought. And I don't want somebody to come in and say, oh, well, we changed the rules. It's kind of like Social Security. We all know it'd be more secure if we quit robbing from it. Well, for those homes to be valued at $300,000, they've got to rob from the equity and value of those homes to bring that up. But in doing that, they bring everybody else down. And that's all I got to say.
It's still open.
Hi, I'm Brenda Mumford, Gary's wife, 1504 Willow Drive. Just a couple of things, just from I don't want to rehash what's already been said, but I've also served on a planning commission, and just from a planning standpoint, spot zoning is not a really great idea, I don't think. And if you spot zone that, then you've got the property right next to it that's also in that zone. I don't know, can you go back to that other slide right before it? So you see the yellow, but there to the west, the other little green piece is going to be an island there of zoning that's just left, that's different from the rest of the whole neighborhood. That's the R120, and if this one goes in, and just from a zoning planning standpoint, I think that's probably bad policy to do that and spot zone something. I would leave it with the residential zoning that it currently has and let them put in 8 homes if they need to, so they each have a half an acre. And I don't know how they can do that with the pipeline and everything that's there, but that would be my preference anyway, is to, I think when you have the overlay zones, what we found in our city when I was on the planning commission is that eventually they get tired of plowing their own streets and they don't have enough money in their homeowners association to take care of the roads the way they ought to be taken care of, so they become run down, and they want to deed them to the city, but they're not to city standards, so they can't, and snowplows can't get in there adequately to do that, and they become a kind of a liability to the city because eventually they're kind of run down and not up to the standards of the residences that are just close by there. And that's all.
All right. Thank you, Brenda.
Can I just add, culinary water pressure in our neighborhood is already very low, and I'm worried that this would even drop that further.
Could I just say one other thing is this whole area,
If we could have the public approach the mic, we need it on the record if you're going to speak.
I'll keep this real short. My neighbors, and at some point I would love to have, but they have animals. We've had calves and goats and horses and chickens, and all those things are approved for this area. And now we're going to bring in millennials that don't know anything about having animals, and we're going to have in their backyard there's going to be a cow or a milk cow or some milk goats. I always tell my wife, honey, we could have 10 goats.
Great opportunity to teach millennials what goats are.
No pigs.
I agree.
No pigs, though?
What's that?
No pigs?
My wife wants a pig. Please don't encourage that. I outgrew pigs.
So, my name's Jim Nooner, and I'm an applicant. I thought we were going to do that at the end, so I may take a little more than 3 minutes. I don't know.
You know what? If you want to take 3 minutes, we'll call the applicants back up after the public hearing.
Well, then I'll
for
just
direct
wait.
questions
I can wait.
from us.
You know what? I'll just wait then, because
That's fine.
I'll just wait and do it all at once. Thanks.
Okay. Is there anyone else in the public that would like to make a comment? Please.
I'm Nancy Over. I'm Elton Over's wife. We live at 1488 Willow Drive. I've been a lifelong resident of Kaysville City. I was born here and raised here. We moved down and built our home here on Willow Drive 20 years ago. We had moved from 200 North East where the Wendy's were. We went all commercial, so we moved down west. And we have found the nicest residential area to build our home in. And we spent our retirement and everything into our home. We have I think quite a nice home right there. And we are the home right next to the Nooners, where you can see where the subdivision will come too, and where we will have a lot of these units right over the back of us. And I think that it really will not be what we need in our area. I think it will kind of make our home less worth, depreciate the worth of our home. It isn't just my home. It's the whole area, all the people in there. And I think they all will kind of suffer from this. And I think it's way too many units for that area. Too many people. We don't need that much more people in our area. So I'm just in opposition of these townhouses at this time.
All right. Thank you, Nancy.
Can I come up to the bench and show you my map?
Sure.
I live right here. Correct. This is the Nooner's house. Correct. Now, they want to come in and right on the corner of my house, they want to start putting in these townhouses. And there's going to be 8 or so of those things right up that fence line. I'm not going to have any front backyard. I'm not going to be able to see anything. It's just...
Okay. Butch's comment was that he lives right here, and they will be building right here along this line next to his house. Thank you. Anyone that we haven't heard from that would like to comment? All right. At this time, then, we'd like to close the public hearing, and we will open it up to the commission to discuss and ask questions.
Do you want to have the applicant come up?
Are there any questions that we have amongst ourselves before he comes up?
Okay.
I thought we were going to do the applicants.
We'll bring you up in just a moment.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Just to know if there are any questions before we have you come up.
No, most questions I have would be towards the applicant.
Towards the applicant. Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't you come on up then? And Jim, if you can reintroduce yourself, that'd be great.
Sure. I'm Jim Nooner. I live at 1480 Willow Drive, and I think I've got a presentation. If you can pull that up. So while that's coming up, it was interesting putting together my thoughts on this. And first of all, I want to say that I can understand a lot of the emotion around this. I mean, these are most of the people who spoke are my neighbors. I love them. They're good people, and I understand the feelings that are here. We've had, as Clark said, we've had a lot of those feelings over the years dealing with a lot of these issues. So I just wanted to show that that's where I live. We have a 1.55 acre lot, and we back up there to the Smiths. You can see that as a part of the layout. The orange layout is actually the rezone is for 1 acre, but the plot and what we're looking at is not quite as close to Butch's house. It doesn't mean it won't have an impact on him. It will, but it's not as close as what he was seeing, and I understand some of that concern. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So I wanted to just show this. This is actually from when we were digging the hole for our house. This is March of 1998, and you can see out to the west. That's looking west towards where the Smiths is at. Those homes that you see in the background are on the other side of Flint. There really were no subdivisions at that time. We were one of the first subdivisions that went in, and I remember going to church and people would say, "Oh, you live in the subdivision." So, we had a lot of those feelings of, "Oh, your people that are coming in are going to change things," and we don't like that. We don't want that to happen. But now that there are subdivisions all around here, and that's obviously not a new thing. Everyone knows that, but. So I just want to show that view, and now if you go to the next slide. So this is the view from my backyard now. That's the Smiths, and that's the Smiths parking lot. That's at night. You can see what normal dark would be at the bottom of the slide and what dark is like in my backyard by seeing the lights. Go to the next slide. So that's the view of the mountains that we have now, and go ahead and go to the next slide. And there's the parking lot and all the other buildings. So, we understand, we obviously weren't excited when this was happening, and we were concerned. And, At the time, I got really kind of angry because, as Clark said, when we built our homes originally, we were told by the city, we went into the city as well and said, what's the plan? You guys hear this stuff all the time, right? The plan was at that time, hey, all commercial is slated in downtown and this is all residential, and we bought it. Now, we understand conditions changed. The people at that time when that plan was put together couldn't really envision what's happened in the city. Now the city needed more revenue. And you guys had consultants that came in and said, that's the best piece of property you've got in the city to put commercial on. And we just had the bad luck of living next to it. So, that piece was put in, and between Smith's and the city, they did put a nice wall in. I think that was helpful. Okay? I think it did help, but you saw the impact to what we had and what we have now. And as has been mentioned, you hear car horns, and you get a snowstorm in the winter, and the snow plows go through that parking lot at 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's all that kind of stuff. So to me, there's an impact, and it's a result of poor planning. But I don't know that you can really fault anybody. It's what happened. But now there's no buffer between our residential zone and one of the largest commercial zones in the city. It would be nice to have some kind of a buffer. Okay, next slide, please. So that, again, is March 1998. That's, I think, just before they started digging the hole. That's my son, Austin, who was 5 at the time, on the right-hand side. Go to the next slide. So this is Austin now. He just graduated from Utah State. He's married, has a new son, graduated in May, and mechanical engineer. And both Austin and Maddie really have grown up in Kaysville. Families are here, wanted to buy a house in Kaysville. Moved in with us as they were looking for a home, and looked really hard for 6 months and couldn't find anything, and just this week closed on a home in Layton and are having to move out of the city. So, not if this development goes in or something like it, and I don't know if it's exactly the right development. I'm not speaking about that. I'm just speaking about the zoning. But our kids are having to leave, and we can all say that doesn't matter, but it does to me. It does to my family. I'd love my kids to be able to live closer. Next slide, please. So, you look at this, and I'm a little surprised we haven't heard more about traffic. I'm sure traffic will come up, but when we moved in out here, Second North was a very narrow country lane full of potholes, no stoplights at the freeway. You could go over where the rail trail was, where the tracks were, and you could give your kids a thrill if they were sitting in the back seat because there was a hump, and you could throw them up in the air. I'm sure this is going to be. When Legacy goes in, I would imagine that's going to be 4-lane all the way out, correct? All the way out? Is that the plan, to connect that 4-lane all the way out to Legacy? So it won't be just a 2-lane, it'll be a 4-lane.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah, the right-of-way width exists to be able to do that.
Yeah. There's obviously concerns about traffic that have to be dealt with. There's concerns about the rail trail that are legitimate. We have 2 dogs. Had 2 dogs. One of them passed away. But we've walked over on that rail trail across that road 1,000+ times, and it's going to be a bigger issue when it becomes a 4-lane. So that's going to have to be dealt with regardless of what happens. I guess the last thing I'd want to talk about is, look, I understand the emotion, and I understand the feelings of I didn't want the Smiths to happen, but it happened, and we try to make the best of it. I guess this property exists. If I had my choice, I would put a flag lot in my backyard. But I don't have the offset to allow me to get in there. I know that the city just passed an ordinance that allows flag lots off cul-de-sacs. Great idea, except I only have about 30 foot to the side of my house, and I need about 40, I think, in order to get. One of my daughters would love to build a home in the backyard. That's what I'd really love to do, but I can't do that. I look at this property and I say the city needed a retail center, and they put a retail center in there, and it's a major retail center, and you can see what it looks like. You're going to have a major artery, a major 4-lane road going back and forth through there. Who is legitimately going to put a $500,000 house, or who's going to put a single-family home there? It doesn't fit. And there's no transition between the retail center and the residential, where this, I don't know if the development that's the plot that's there is exactly the right plot, but it would certainly be better than more commercial, or if you could do 8 lots and it would actually sell, I'd be fine with it. But I don't believe that people will develop and put homes in that spot. So anyway, so I appreciate it. I hope that we can. I appreciated. There's a lot of feelings, but I really appreciate that people came and talked and were civil. I've been around and talked to many of the people all the people in my cul-de-sac, and I didn't get up to Clark because anyway, I should have come seen you, Clark. Sorry about that. But I've been around and talked to many people, and I hope that we can continue to work through this process and get to something that works for everybody and allows the people to develop it. So thank you for that.
All right.
Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, why don't you hang on there a minute? We have a few questions.
So you're just selling your property. Are you actually participating with the developer?
No. And it's not sold. We've talked about it. I mean, obviously no, I'm not part of the development, no.
Okay. Yeah, most of mine would probably be more to the developer and then maybe some city questions, staff questions.
Just a question from me then. Has anyone approached you previously to buy that portion of your property to do anything other than this? Is this the first time anybody's come to you?
Yeah, it's landlocked, so I really can't. Again, we bought an acre and a half, and we hoped at one point to put horses back there. That for various reasons we didn't do that. We're now getting older. It's a lot to take care of, and we would love to be able to sell some of it.
You can put goats back there, apparently.
Pigs.
Yeah, okay.
No pigs. Yeah, we'll keep away from that.
Anything else?
I think that's it from us.
Thanks for the opportunity to come and be with you tonight. So thank you.
Appreciate that, Jim. All right. If the developer would like to come and, or are you the other property owner? Okay.
I'm Robert Green, Jay Green's son, so we've owned that property since I was 16 years old. And I don't think there's more founding families in Kaysville than the Greens and the Flints and the Websters and the Hills and the Barnes. All of them are relatives. Often people move into a city and they want the door shut behind them. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. We've tried to go to Ed Green and get multiple lots. He couldn't find any buyers for it. Put 7 lots in there because of the high-pressure pipelines there and because of a Smith's there. That was where our first goal was to put in residential. That didn't happen. So we approached you with the townhome idea to see if that would work. Is it the right setup? I'm not sure. Do we need to have less? I'm not sure. Should it be commercial? We're open to that. I'm the youngest of the 5 children. I'm 61. And as I asked Larry Page one day when we met him earlier, I said, what if it was your property? What would you do with it? And I guess I would ask the city as well. It's easy for the residents to say, let's put some large homes there. That's not going to happen. And we still own 5 acres across the street from them where the Bible church is, that we'll talk about at another time. But again, we're not trying to push anything down anybody's throat. We're here to counsel with you, and all of you. I appreciate your comments that you've had. They've been very good. I heard Facebook got a little out of control today, and I appreciate admin shutting that down because I didn't hear that, but I got a few telephone calls, and there was a lot of untruths that were there. But so from a property owner standpoint, representing the J. Green family estate, we want to put something there that we'll be proud of and something that will be a legacy. There was so many people against the Smith's property when they bought it from my Uncle Vernon when Kaysville City, and now you look at it, it's a thriving community. I've talked to retail. I've talked to all of the other business owners, mentioned the potential of townhomes. What do you think they would say? For people to be able to walk to do groceries and the store and the doctor and the bank. So hopefully we can come up with what everyone's happy with, and we're certainly, as the Green family, willing to work with Kaysville City, which we love.
Thank you very much. Why don't you come on back up?
Did you have some questions for me?
Please. Gary, did you want to start?
Yeah, just had a few. There were some good points that were made from the public comments that I liked, and probably have you address some of them. One of the concerns I had that was brought up was the alignment of the streets and the traffic, with 200 being a major artery basically, and with it designed now to where we can restripe that to get the 4 lanes. I'm not so worried about that being a collector street as much as I'm worried about where you've offset from across the street from that ingress and egress, and then also with the crossing of the rail trail, which is right next to the entrance going to Dismiss. So the alignment of the streets, I wanted to ask you if you guys had what you've looked at, traffic flow and traffic patterns, and also the dead-end streets. That was another concern I had that was brought up with the dead-end streets. And
okay.
I know you don't have room to do cul-de-sacs, but I like somebody made a comment about a circular type pattern going through there.
Well,
but what have you guys looked at and addressed traffic pattern-wise?
Okay, thank you. And I've got a few notes here from when Mr. Mumford came up and proposed some of those things. Just to let you know, we have not done a survey on this yet, and so I've turned this is an architectural rendering of the concept that we would like to do. So anything on here right now, we've got the outside boundaries of the property, and that's where the property lines are those dark lines that you can kind of. I'm not a pig farmer, but I'm not as smart as a pig farmer either. So, I think the green line. There's a 40-foot setback easement between here and the rail trail, and wherever that rail trail is right now, or the property line, I'm assuming it's right in here somewhere. But we've got a 40-foot setback from the property that we have to be off of, and so. Thank you, Lyle. I think that is the property line right there. You'll see the trees are on the property line. So anyway, we still need to meet with L3 Communications, with the gas pipeline company. There's several people that are using that easement right now. I've got the documentation. We need to communicate with them. So that is the next step that we will need to take. And so as far as street alignments, great planning. That street does need to align with the one across the street. I'm assuming my architect may have looked at Google Earth and just kind of fit something in there. We don't have a survey yet. A survey will bring all of that information to us, and we will make the appropriate design on the property in order to make it work right. And so let's see, the dead-end streets. That's why we kind of tried to make a circular pattern right there in the middle. We will look and see if there is a possibility that we can maybe put a cul-de-sac up, or turnaround or something up here at the top. I don't know yet. Again, this is a very rough sketch of what we'd like to do. As far as the dumpsters and the fences and whatnot, we're just going to, and the visitor parking. The PRUD overlay, I'm sure Lyle does call out for, I'm sure it does have parking requirements that we will have to meet based on how many units. We don't show that right now because we didn't have that information, but there's plenty of room to put parking, here, visitor parking over here, possibly right in here. So this plan is going to change. One other thing that we've noticed in townhome projects that I've done in the past, we've done some that have single-car units, and we shy away from those. So there are no single-car units in here. They're all two-car units, because then the parking can also take place in front of the unit. So that if you have visitors, you got an extra 2 stalls of parking there, and they do count those typically in a PRUD design. And so all of that will be decided by the engineer. I think I've addressed the easement and the trees and et cetera.
On the easement really quick. So where your line of trees, where is that in conjunction with the gas line? Somebody said it sits right on top.
I'm assuming that, yes, it sits right. I think that black line with the line of trees right there is the property line. There's our call right there. So that is the property line. And so there is a 40-foot offset. So we do need to approach the gas company to make sure that we can do what we've got designed on this project. Obviously, if we can't do it, we can't do it. But that remains to be seen, whether or not they allow trees or what type of vegetation they allow on that easement. I know that obviously there is some allowance for vegetation, because if you look all along there, I've run that trail and I bike that trail all the time, and there are trees all up and down that easement. And what the stipulations are, we're not sure yet, but we will comply with, obviously, with what the the owners of the easement will require. Obviously, the property is owned fee simple by the Greens at this point in time, and it is an owned piece of, it is a titled piece of property that they do own, but they have granted an easement, and therefore they've given their rights away, obviously, to that, and we will have to comply with that easement.
Okay.
So,
I've got more questions on it as well. So we've talked about the easement, water and sewer we've addressed earlier. Somebody brought up a buffer between the properties to the west along there and some type of a fence. You mentioned just a minute ago you haven't really addressed fence and dumpsters. But from a fence and a buffer between those properties, what have you had any consideration on what you're doing with that?
obviously, because of different zones, we do have to put a fence in. And I have discussed a few things with Lyle as far as putting together a development agreement if we get this zoning, so that as we go forward, what we talk about here tonight is what goes on at the property. And I get that from a planning commission standpoint. And planning is you have developers come in and say, well, we'd like to do this, this, and this. Well, how do you actually get them to do what they said they would do? And in discussing this with Lyle, I'd like to put a development agreement together so that whether, we need to decide what type of fencing we need. That decision has not yet been made.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of the questions I have, I know this is for rezone, and I'm probably asking questions that are more along the line of the next step that we'd have. But the setback was another concern that some people brought up that I was also a little concerned about. Looking at the ones that, again, border the property on the west, this is probably more for Lyle. So the setback requirements, it looks like they've got patios, and then the probably aren't too far set off at the property line, but does the setback, is it from the structure, or would the patio be considered where setback's at?
Yeah, so typically under the city ordinances, for example, a rear yard might be 15 feet, and that is anything vertical above the ground. So if it's flat work, if it were a concrete patio or a deck or something, that would be fine. If it's a second story patio of that, or balcony, I guess would be the term, that would be something we'd consider inside a setback, and so would not be allowed. So,
what is the setback requirement for the backyard on this?
So a typical R2 would have an 8-foot side yard, 15-foot setback. I'll double check that as I'm quoting from memory. I don't know the exact dimension that this is drawn here through a PRUD and a development agreement. The PRUD allows the Planning Commission to have flexibility. It could also allow you to be very specific and being less flexible, I guess you could say. So if you're inclined, again, to allow something like that and you thought 15 feet was too close, you could require additional distances and other things from the development.
Okay, thanks. And then the other on you said the price point's 300 plus, so that they're obviously going to be nice. But what is your construction material and design, and what are you proposing there?
Design would fit the hometown feel of Kaysville City, pitched roofs. We have not looked at more of the modern flat roof design like you would find in it'd be 2 stories. This is not. You see stuff in Salt Lake going on that's a 3-story type product. Flat. I love the design, but I just don't feel it fits for Kaysville City. So they're a pitched roof with brick, no stucco, and typically a hardy type siding, a cement fiberboard siding with brick and stone. Actually, mostly brick. So.
All right. Then I'm almost done with it. So the next one is, what has been your experience with you as a developer with this type of a product? And how much experience do you have? You mentioned you've built custom homes and other homes, and you've done some commercial kind of a mix.
In the past 10 years, I've developed about 400 townhome lots between Ogden, Layton, one project in Cedar City. We didn't build all those out. We've sold them. We built a few of them. Did a couple up in West Haven. One project up there had 240 units in it. So it was quite a bit larger than this one. One in Layton we did had 89 units in it. Another one in West Haven had 89, and one in Cedar City 250 units. And so we've developed and designed a lot of these units. And so, this is a smaller product. We wanted a higher end product, and so that's why we were looking at doing this. I think one of the attractions is the rail trail and the Smiths area right there. I can envision people being able to utilize those services right there just by walking across the street. Be very convenient right there for the people to do that. So, anyway.
All right, thanks. I'm done. I'm out.
Any further questions?
I did have a question about, because you mentioned single-family homes wouldn't work there, but I think it's been kind of explained. It's just mostly because they wouldn't sell. You don't think lots that size would sell right there?
Yeah, I just, with that little corner right there, I just, we've had people look at buying the property for possibly doing that, and it's just an area where it doesn't make sense that I don't think people would buy a $700,000-$800,000 home right there in that area because of access. Obviously, if you were to be able to come in from somewhere in the front and be able to, if you were able to access from here somehow and put a fence back here along 200 North and have this be somebody's backyard and have the buffer from the street, then yes, it would make sense. For example, Nephi Harvey's piece down here, if this develops, he's large enough to come in, have a side street come in here, just like this is developed here. You come in here, you have all these homes in here, and it makes a nice area. With this one, it's just a little bit more difficult, and I don't think we'd be able to attract the people to come in there, just with it being squeezed in kind of that area. That's why we feel it makes better sense to have more of a buffer area. And like what Jim has mentioned, you build a couple of these units here, it's going to take away from the sounds that come from over here as much. It's going to create a buffer area, and hopefully, what's that? Oh, so, I think that is going to, obviously it's going to help with sounds coming from over there, and possibly the light bleed that comes off of the Smiths. It will obviously help block that a little bit. There's trade-offs. You have a few more neighbors, and that's what you end up with. So.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, discussion. Thoughts?
So
go ahead, Tam.
I was just going to say, so really our job tonight, or the question before us, is whether or not we think a rezone to a higher density is appropriate here, right? That's the question for us to think about.
I think to make a recommendation
that's what we're making a recommendation on
the City Council as to whether this should be rezoned or not.
Okay. If that's an appropriate use of the property, right, in terms of a rezone.
I think so.
Okay.
And given what's been asked for and what the characteristics are, several thoughts that I've had. The general plan for Kaysville does say west of I-15, generally 2 units per acre, but it does say that along major streets there can be higher density, and this is along a major street. I think, and back in September, the City Council adopted this resolution from the Housing Gap Coalition, which talked about looking for more housing diversity in the city, for looking at products that can enhance housing affordability. And, when you talk about some of the discussion has been if they put single-family homes there, they're going to probably be in the $600,000-$700,000 range. Townhouses like this would probably be more in the $300,000 range. That's still pretty high, but honestly, it's about as cheap as anything you're going to find in just about anywhere these days. So that really does kind of make it more affordable. Given that, and the fact that the City Council just adopted that resolution, I'm kind of inclined to say that a project like this, I think, is worthwhile to look at. It's relatively small. It's not a huge impact. The one concern that I've got, though, that I'd like to find out more about is the sewer capacity. If they've been planning for somewhat lower density all along, and my guess is they could handle this one, but can they handle any more than that on additional properties? And there are other properties along here that would kind of fall into that same characteristic of being along a major street and looking at this. So I don't know. That one's a little bit troublesome about whether there's the capacity. And Lyle, I don't know if we know about the culinary water pressure.
I don't. So that comment was interesting. Something we'd have to look into. And typically, the comments I hear is we've got pretty good pressure citywide, but it could be that this is a unique spot where there's some items to look at, and whether this helps or hurts that situation. Sometimes as we loop systems, it can improve it, but obviously as you add users to it, it could also hurt it. So that is not something we've looked at specifically yet on this.
Yeah. It's it's right near the Smiths. It's right adjacent to a trail. There's a lot of things about it that really would say to me, this is a good place to put a project kind of like this. But I do have some concerns about whether there is the infrastructure capacity for it. And then the question really becomes, the infrastructure should be developed and sized to accommodate what the city is hoping to have built there. Mm-hmm. And it could be done. It could be upgraded, but it would cost to do that, and the difficulty of doing that. And so that's another thing to kind of look at, I guess, and to consider in all of this. So, yeah.
And if I may, Planning Commission, I'm going through correspondence. So I've had contact with the sewer district, and they sent me some information earlier that it doesn't change exactly what I said, but just be more direct and from them. So having looked at it, and the 30 units per acre, in addition to what was expected on this property, says they don't believe they have capacity for that density. They know they have capacity for the 2 units per acre. So,
and they're talking
exactly where it comes down.
They're talking generally, right, about not just this property, but other properties.
Well, yeah, they're looking at this site specifically, and they just say we've planned for 2 units per acre. So
okay.
It's a clear challenge, one that possibly can be addressed. I don't know for certain on that, but that would be, should there be direction to move that way, then I think the resources are more inclined to find solutions after this process.
Yeah, sure.
I tend to agree with some of the comments you made. I've expressed a lot of the concerns I have with the property, but on the other side, as you look at the general plan, Kaysville should be primarily a residential community that promotes business, industry, and public use. Talks about growth occurring throughout the city, major arteries such as 200. That goes on. It should be located throughout the city, restricted to where it's incompatible with other necessary uses. It does talk about west. And some of the time this was done, some of the thought that they had at that time on the sizing, but as you look at it, and I looked at this quite a bit, and I drive by there every day because I live out there. And I look at that; it's a irregular piece. It's kind of an odd piece. And as you look at other developments in other communities, a lot of them with similar type surroundings, they buffer with some type of a multifamily. Typically, something that is nice that acts as a nice buffer, because those homes. I mean, we do have some really nice homes over there. So I'm kind of inclined that I think, given the circumstances in the property, it probably is one of the better uses for that property. But I am concerned about some of the issues. I think, me personally, I think at least me, I feel it's almost too preliminary to make a decision. We don't know about the sewer. I would like to see a little bit more with the traffic patterns, the flow, the easement, and how that would flow in, how they're going to buffer the surrounding, neighborhood up there. And I know that's taking it to the next step, but those are questions I have.
And I think, Commissioner Bullock, that would be appropriate. There are many ways you could respond to the task tonight. As far as that recommendation, you could, as the developer stated, they're willing to look at a development agreement. We see this on occasion where someone would come back with a more refined, detailed plan. Perhaps you would like to see that before you actually make a recommendation to the city council, but if you'd like this evening to give direction to make certain changes, again, if the vote or the motion is no, this isn't right, that may be one thing, but if the feeling is maybe something like's been presented, highlight the items that ought to be addressed through a development agreement, that could be brought back before the planning commission, along with answers to sewer, culinary water, some of the questions that come up, if that helps you make a decision before a final recommendation to the council.
Appreciate that, because like I said, I think that some type of development's similar to that, a multifamily there probably fits the use if it meets the criteria and can actually qualify given those circumstances. And I realize too that if we made a recommendation that it could still be, based upon the development agreement, or the city council could shut it down, or it will die if they can't meet the sewer and water and culinary requirements and those things. So there's still some of that, but I would, even though I'm in favor of some type of a development of this nature going there, I think there's too many unanswered questions for me. That's my opinion. 1 out of 4 right here.
Okay.
So.
I was going to say, I agree. I agree with everything that's being said. And also, I think it does kind of set a precedence for some other properties in the surrounding areas. I thought that was a good point. I'm in favor of higher density housing because we don't have a lot of diversity, and we need it. I mean, it's got to happen at some point so that we've got a little bit more of affordable options. And I realize $300,000 is still a lot of money, but I also like that the owners are interested and willing to do what fits the community and to do what's best for the community. That could be a great extension of general commercial. I think people know I'm in favor of that. So I think I don't feel like we can really make a decision either, but I would like to see some more public outreach. I mean, it is December. People are busy. It'd be interesting to see what people kind of think would work there, and also what the city would like to do in terms of development and planning, because a comment was made that spot development or spot zoning is maybe not the best thing, and I tend to agree also. I think a general plan is better, and I know that they're working on that, so that's my opinion.
Yeah. I also think I did take a much wider look at this too, and I was looking at other areas that might fit, and as you do take a wide look, there's not very many areas. You're buffered by a rail trail, you're buffered by the Smiths, and if they could get an appropriate buffer, I'm not actually. It was actually yesterday. North-south of Davis High School, there's a community in there that a senior community, and I can't remember the name of it, but we had a couple that we used to live by that moved there, and we took a gift over to them. Those are beautiful. It's a beautiful subdivision there. They're smaller homes, but they're single. I mean, they're rambler homes. Look very, very nice. I don't know what the density is in there, but I was looking at it going, this is a really nice community in here. The homes are nice. They're well maintained. They're beautiful homes. But I look at, in our neighborhood, Paul, look how many kids have come back to live with their parents because they can't afford homes. And then a lot of them that have, we've had others that have tried to buy property out in that area. That we're faced with the problem where Kaysville is such a great place. People want to stay here. They want to live here. And they want to come back here. They want to raise their families here. And this does meet some diversity, and we have gotten to where housing's priced up pretty high. So
I have a question, Lyle. So what kind of a recommendation based upon kind of what we're maybe, I don't know if we're all collectively feeling this. Sorry, you might not have a chance to express yourself. But,
it's okay.
But I mean, based upon that kind of feeling of maybe we need more information, what kind of a recommendation do we make?
Well, I think we could take an action to table it.
To table it, okay.
And look, and then specify what we'd like to see, what additional information. And I'm kind of leaning that way at this point, for a couple of reasons. They're asking for just an R2 rezone, but the plan they're showing here would also require a PRUD zoning as well. And so, is 37 the right number of units? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. It probably depends on the details. And there were a lot of questions about the details asked tonight, and they've said that they're being pretty general at this point. And I get that, and I think that's entirely appropriate. But perhaps we need to nail down some of the details a little bit more before we're ready to recommend on a rezone. I think, maybe we could also get some more time and get some more definitive answers with regard to the sewage capacity and maybe even the culinary water question to find out a little bit more about that. But I'm not ready, or I don't think I'm willing to say not to rezone it. I think I'm willing to keep looking at it and seeing if we can get some more answers to some of these issues and concerns.
I agree.
I'd like to make just a couple comments. First, I think it's a great use for the property in the location. You're next to a commercial. This is ideal. This is what developers look for, something to buffer between larger homes. I've worked in the multifamily industry for the last 30 years. This is where we look to build things. We don't look to plop it in the middle of a neighborhood and go, we want 400 units here. We put it along a major road. This is what we're looking at. We've referred repeatedly to the general plan. The emails that were sent to us were betraying the master plan, was one of the comments that was made. These are general plans. These are not specific plans. We're not saying this property shall be from now until the end of time. We're saying in general in this area, this is what we'd like. So for those of you who built your property back in 1999, it was a general plan back then too. It's a general plan now. Those things change. They are adapted to our needs at the time. That's why we have a Smith's there now. I'm guessing that pretty much everyone in this room has been in that Smith's shopping and enjoys it. As much as we hated it when it was being built. And maybe there's one of you who's still holding out and may drive somewhere else to go, but I kind of doubt it. So our circumstances change. I agree that there are still a lot of unanswered questions. Despite being in favor of this, I would be very much in favor of tabling it and giving people an opportunity to come out to another public hearing. Hopefully we can keep it at 3 minutes and we can keep our comments focused, because I imagine we'd have more. But again, to quote one of the emails from the Einfeld family, the city is notorious for poor notification. I did not know that we were notorious for that, but apparently this has been proven time and time again. I think it would behoove us as a city to give notice again. We don't have a meeting, I believe, until the second week of January.
Yes, that's correct.
That's a month. I think we can maybe lose some of our notoriety if we move this back to that meeting, or perhaps even the one past that, depending on the developer and his thoughts. But this would give people time to be done with the holidays, to schedule their time. It's on a Thursday night, starts about 7. Clear your calendars. We love comments from the public. We do. Even our wonderful pig farmers or retired pig farmers, we love to hear from everyone. But we also like solutions. Anyone can come up and point out problems with anything. And to a large degree, these are the developers' responsibilities. Fix these things, like sewer problems, water pressure problems, things that maybe even before this evening you weren't aware could potentially be issues. You've got a month. You're on the clock. Let's find these things out. And it would be great to be able to come and answer those questions for us, because I think in general my feeling has been we're fairly supportive of the idea and the location and what's going on there. Just a lot of unanswered questions that hopefully we could resolve before another meeting.
You know what, I was going to say, we did get a few emails, and there was a comment made, and I've heard it before from some of the emails, and there was even a comment tonight that kind of alluded to it, about how the city can do this. And one of them said, how can you guys even consider it? It's greed. And I just want to point out, any citizen has the right to petition the city if they want a conditional use or a zoning change. That is their right. Now, our obligation is to listen to it. We have to be able to come up and hear it. And it's not the city that's the developer. It's not the city that's the landowner. It's not the city that's profiting from it. The city has to balance it and figure out we've got to fund the infrastructure and be able to support it, through public safety and roads and other type of stuff. So I hear that time and time again, and it's a little concerning to me because every citizen has a right to do that, and we have the obligation to hear it and to make our best judgment based on what's before us. And it's not the city that's profiting from it. And so when we look at these things, we look at it to see what really is the best use, not just today but in the future for our community to help build it. And so your input is extremely important to us, and we listen to you, we hear it. And we take that into consideration, and good points come up. I mean, a lot of things that were brought up tonight were concerns I had, and there were some suggestions that I heard tonight that if you could do some type of circular thing in there to make the flow better, so that's I just wanted to clarify that because it is concerning to me because I hear it over and over, and we try to do the best we can, and we live in the community. We're neighbors, we're residents, we're friends, and we have to balance, and that's kind of our task at hand. But we do appreciate everything you guys do and you coming out. This is what the process is about, is getting the public involved and hearing that feedback. So, thank you.
Absolutely.
Ready for a motion?
We're ready for a motion, Wolf.
I'd like to make a motion that we table the request for the rezone on 4.1 acres at 1480 West Willow Drive and 1576 West 200 North. Should we say reschedule or schedule again another public hearing? Would that be something we specifically would like to advertise and go forward again, or do we just list it as a public meeting that we'll take public comment at again? Lyle?
Well, and I'd be happy to maybe even to clean things up a little bit with what's being considered, remail, repost, and add the PRUD under the consideration of that. And so in order for that to even be considered, we may as well resend mailers and such.
So do a public
from
hearing
scratch.
Again. Okay, so then hold a public hearing at our next Planning Commission meeting on this, and then address, invite the applicants to take the comments that were made here and the concerns that were expressed and do some additional work and get some more details, and let's look at it again at our next Planning Commission meeting.
Second.
Where are we at, me?
I think we...
Aye.
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 All right, thank you all very much for that. And if the developer wants to grab Lyle on the way out, because I think he starts Christmas vacation probably like 5 minutes after this meeting. No.
I wish.
Okay.
And for those who are here and listening, that January 10th would likely be that meeting. January 10th. Yep.
All right, the next agenda item is a call to the public. So if there's anybody that didn't get enough the first time and would like to come back up, or has something else that they'd like to bring up, or just want to tell Tamara what a great job she's doing, you're welcome to come up and do that at this time.
Just wanted to make one correction. If you can go back, I maybe won't go back, but the gas pipeline is actually on the property. It's not part of the rail easement. It's a separate easement that is actually part of. So if you look at the actual picture, you can see it better. The photo. Right here, you've got the valve boxes.
Right.
Here.
Oh.
So this shows where the pipeline runs.
Yeah, I see.
Here. So it's not in the railway.
It's not in the UTA right of way.
It's
Yeah.
actually over here on the property, and so there's going to be some back off of that as well.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, that looks
And,
like it
and
runs
that's going to
right
be
down.
incumbent on the developer to come back to us, and that's obviously a question that we have. We're still open to the public, so if you want to come back up, remind us of your name again, and we'll...
I'm Paul Mulder. I just want you
Thanks,
to know,
Paul.
I'm not a pig farmer. I grew up on a pig farm.
He's a
Left when
professional
I
storyteller.
graduated at 16. I'm actually a principal engineer with experience in nuclear and fossil power plants, and every nuclear plant in this nation holds one of my designs.
You know,
So,
I wrote you down
I
as
just
Paul
think
the
as
pig
dumb as I
farmer, so
look,
I don't
as
know if we
daft
can
as
go
I
away
seem.
from that or not.
That's great.
You will forever be known as a pig farmer.
Right.
Paul the nuclear engineer. All right, if there's no other public comment, reports, correspondence, and calendar.
So I've got 2 reports for the Planning Commission, and any of the public are here. So the city held yesterday an open house for input from the public, kind of in consideration of Main Street. There's some consideration on meeting some space needs here with this building, and before that moves forward, they wanted to make sure that they weren't forgetting how it might interact with Main Street itself here in this area. So there are some boards out in the hall. I'd encourage the Planning Commission maybe take a minute to look at them, or any public that's interested, where you can leave some comments on some things that you like, don't like, and if you had your ideal scenario for what this part of town could be, let us know through that. The other item, was alluded.
How was the turnout for that, by the way, yesterday?
It was slim, so I didn't take count personally, but maybe 15 people we had pop in from the public, mostly businesses, at least that I interacted with right here in the area. So
Tough during the holidays to get a lot of people out.
A bit tricky. Wednesday nights are
Good to have
tough, but
Santa
every
Claus
night's
here.
tough. So yeah. So again, we'll leave these out, I think, in the foyer for a little bit, so the general public can continue to do that. And if you'd like to leave any comments. Second, I heard this evening the internet still is an issue. Our IT is working on it, so I've heard that they're now convinced that there is an issue. They weren't so certain of that, but I do have that from them directly that they're reworking on it. I thought perhaps it may be completed this evening. It sounds like it may not be, but I do know that that's in the works. So if this solution doesn't fix it, then we can get more creative. And then the calendar item that I have has already been stated. We've agreed previously that that's enough Planning Commission for the month of December. Go enjoy the holidays and the end of the year. We'll reconvene back in January on our normal schedule, the second and fourth Thursday of the month.
So then the previous item we just talked about, we're bringing that back on the first meeting or the second meeting? The 11th?
I think you said
Okay.
10th?
Yeah, I believe January 10th was that
Okay,
second
got it.
Thursday, which is our first meeting in January.
Okay.
I was just curious. So someone mentioned widening the 5 mile or what 500 the notification for things.
500 feet.
For the 500 feet, yeah. I mean that probably gets expensive. So, is there another way to share that?
Yeah, and it's always tricky. So, 500 feet obviously is a round number. What the exact perfect distance is to send notices to different jurisdictions are all across the board on how far they're sending it. So the council ultimately settled on that. It is from the perimeter of the property. So when I send those, I put it into our GIS or mapping system, select in this case.
Okay.
Just because it's easier, the entirety of the Nooner property, for example, even though only portions of it were part of the rezone. So it actually extended the area that got noticed from to include all that 500 feet from there. So you, at least in west of I-15, a lot of properties are 90, 100 feet wide. So roughly 5 houses in every direction. They get that mailed notice, and then we do also put up the sign so that as people are driving by, whether they live close or not, whether they stop to read it and see what it actually is, they can make note of that. And as Commissioner Summercoin pointed out, we're also putting it in the state website, our website, and other locations that people who follow those things, they find out about it. Yep.
So they're getting notification. Okay.
I don't know. Is that been a perennial, notorious issue? That those notices, they don't get them until just a few days?
I've heard that my entire career, every jurisdiction, every item. It's tricky, and you can't necessarily blame the public for always wanting more and an additional notification and time to be involved. We are trying to work with the applicants on keeping things going forward. They can't wait forever to get into something. So time frame, a distance, a cost are all a portion of that. So it is a balancing act, and it's tricky. And I think it's improved the amount of involvement we've seen by doing the mailers versus the clipper. So we've seen, I think, more people at our meetings over the recent history.
Using
whether
this
that-
one as an example, when did they come to you to put this on the agenda? Because that's going to dictate
How quickly?
Yeah, I mean, if
Yeah.
they come to you and it's 12 days, well, we're going to meet our 10 days, and that's about it.
I may not make it if they only come a couple days before I have to get the notice out, and often I don't. And so I'd say minimum 2 weeks that they've been with me, discussing the process and have actually submitted. And again, that'll vary depending on the complexity and stuff of the issues that we're looking at and going over. But yeah, oftentimes is the case with this. We've been meeting and discussing certain things for several weeks before they ever make application, and we'll go from there.
Okay. All right, if there's nothing else, can I have a motion to close things down for the rest of the year? Or at least for tonight.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Yeah. See you guys next year.
Yes, see you all. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.